There are nearly 200 RPGs released on the PlayStation 2 in the US, and that is absurd. I had no idea how to choose from the list which games to talk about. Do I talk about the best? Do I talk about the worst? Action RPGs, tactical RPGs? I couldn't decide. But I came up with a brilliant plan. I took a list of 168 PlayStation 2 RPGs, removing some games that were questionable regarding their RPG status, and I cut numbers and placed them in a hat and drew from there. Out of the 168, I drew these. Let's get started. Atelier Iris Eternal Mana. When Atelier Iris Eternal Mana released for the PlayStation 2 in 2004, 2005 in North America respectively, it introduced many RPG fans outside of Japan to a series that had been building a reputation for nearly a decade. Not a huge surprise, as Japan seems to always get the cool RPG stuff first. This might have been our first game in the series, but it was the 6th mainline entry in the Atelier series. Before Eternal Mana, the series in Japan had been focused on alchemy, small-scale character-driven stories, and a slower, more methodical pace compared to the large, save-the-world narratives of its RPG contemporaries. But Atelier Iris Eternal Mana was a turning point. While it retained the developer Gust's signature alchemy system and charming low-stakes premise, it was also designed with a broader audience in mind. The previous games, to my knowledge, limited players to a strict time management mechanic. Atelier Iris, however, Eternal Mana, gave players freedom to explore, experiment, and craft at their own pace. That accessibility, coupled with the vibrant anime art style and lighthearted tone, made it an approachable starting point for new fans. Bright it is, colorful it is, low stakes it is, and there's just no denying that. The story follows Klein, a young alchemist in training, as he travels the world, regalizing, I suppose, in search of the mystical power known as mana. Now, of course, I've heard these names pronounced in the cutscenes or whatever, but Klein is the one that stuck with me, and the rest of them I kind of forgot since I played the game. Along the way, he meets Lita, a spirited girl with a mysterious connection to the mana, and a colorful party of allies who all bring their own quirks to the journey. Unlike the grim, world-ending plots that dominated early 2000s RPGs, Eternal Mana keeps its stakes grounded in its own chilled-out logic. Don't get me wrong, the narrative does escalate a bit, but it never loses sight of that simple sort of interaction between characters. The comedic moments, the day-to-day wonder. Atelier games have become synonymous with crafting system. Using ingredients you gather around town and in maps, along with mana spirits, you can synthesize new items. This really isn't just a side mechanic either. It's sort of one of the points of the whole game. Many obstacles in the world can only be thwarted by crafting the right item, which encourages constant experimentation. Alchemy in Eternal Mana is about creativity, it's about discovery, and the gameplay loop of collecting materials and turning them into something useful. Combat is another area where Eternal Mana balances tradition with a little spice. Rubbing that spice in there.
Well, a little onion, well, a little meat on it.
Battles are turn-based, but go by pretty quickly, honestly. It features a system where positioning and special skills could certainly alter the outcomes. The positioning importance is sort of like Lunar. It's where you target certain abilities and they'll hit in particular areas and deal damage accordingly, so it's worth experimenting with whatever target you're deciding to choose. The mana spirits provide unique abilities, adding to the strategy and customization. Now, while it doesn't have the tactical depth of genre heavyweights, it's, for the most part, breezy, accessible, and fun, fitting that overall tone in the game. Critically, Eternal Mana seems a bit mixed, but generally people seem to like it. It's definitely for a particular type of fan, there's no denying that. Some critics found its low-stake plot too gentle compared to the sweeping narratives of Final Fantasy X or Xenosaga. I don't personally mind a low-stakes RPG, so that doesn't really bother me, but some people had issues with its cozy tone. For many gamers, it's probably a comfort game. A warm, colorful RPG that's a step above a cozy game, as it certainly emphasizes charm and creativity over spectacle. My biggest issue is the voice acting and the uwu. Holy moly. It's a bit excessive for me, honestly. Hey, if this sort of style is your thing, hey, don't let me shame you by any means. You've hit the jackpot with this game though, I'm telling you, shoot. I realize, of course, that there's different strokes for different folks out there, and this is one that I'm glad I tried out for the beautiful art and the comfy storyline, but it's not one that I could see myself really digging any further into. I do think I want to try some of the newer games in the series. There's something about the newer games that's just something appealing about them. Can't quite grasp it. I wonder what it could be. I feel I have to appreciate this game, and we should all give it its due, as Atelier Iris Eternal Mana was the game that brought Gust's alchemical adventures to the West. It obviously localized the series in the US, but it also introduced a philosophy of RPG design that valued the journey, the relationships, and the joy of creation as much as the destination. And for fans who first discovered the Atelier series through it, you're probably still with the new games. Thanks, Eternal Mana! If you grew up grinding in Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, Suikoden, there's a good chance that right now you're probably grinding. Just doing that real life grind, right? And that brings us to today's gracious video sponsor, Rocket Money. Between work and family and trying to play games or whatever else, you probably don't have a lot of time on your hands. You probably don't have enough time to go through your transactions and just look for those little pesky subscriptions that keep sneak attacking your bank account. What Rocket Money does is find those subscriptions that maybe you've forgotten about. Gym memberships, random streaming apps, I don't know, some kind of free thing that you signed up for back in 2019. And Rocket Money allows you to cancel those with just a few clicks. That's pretty simple. Rocket Money, alongside their premium benefits, can help people save hundreds of dollars a year. More junk! You can buy more junk with that money. That's the dream. That's the dream. That's like Balrog action figure kind of money, right? That's not his name. To save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/pixelbro or click on the link in the description below to get started for free today. And trying out Rocket Money really helps out the channel. Thank you, Rocket Money, for being a sponsor of this video, and thank you guys for considering Rocket Money. Let's continue. Musashi Samurai Legend. When Musashi Samurai Legend arrived on the PlayStation 2 in 2005, it came with both excitement and baggage. As a sequel to Brave Fencer Musashi, a PlayStation 1 classic from Square that still gets tons of attention from its fans nowadays, expectations were high, to say the least. If you've skipped this one in the past and you're a Brave Fencer Musashi fan like I am, you're probably expecting great things as well. Well, what we got, instead of another charming Zelda-style action RPG, Samurai Legend opted to reach for that slicker, cel-shaded territory with heavier emphasis on combo-driven combat, which is fine. I didn't expect it. This game felt a little more mature, a little more grown up, and I don't necessarily think that was a good thing for this game. My experience is much the same as it was for sequel fans. It's not the sequel you expect. I mean, I guess you could have gathered that from the cover, but you know what, here we are. This game, however, shows us its ambitions, as it's a stylish oddity full of wild ideas. It has unapologetic PS2 era energy. I wish I could come up with a better explanation for that, but you know what? If you know, you know. You play as Musashi, a brash, dimension-hopping teenage swordsman who's summoned by the mystics of the world of Anthium to rescue kidnapped princesses, defeat the steam-powered Gandrake Corporation, and save their giant living shipwell thing from destruction. The ship thing that you're floating at the Anthium or whatever kind of looks like one of the islands from this game, and I can appreciate that. If you're doing dishes, I'm sorry to pull you away from that or whatever. If you're looking off screen, I was talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 2. So sorry. Let's move on, sorry. Musashi approaches every situation with that like samurai swagger, that naivete, which kind of fuels the humor of the game. Gameplay blends real-time hack and slash action with light RPG mechanics. It's to the point that it took me a moment to go, now why did people call this an RPG? But I found it in the numbers and the stat building, upgrades by the blacksmith and such. It's there. Just give it a second, you'll see it, you'll see it. Musashi wields two blades, a smaller katana for fast attacks and a bigger sword, sometimes elemental, used for charged, sweeping strikes. The switch between these is pretty handy, as circle is the small katana and triangle is the big one, so it's not that terribly cumbersome in battle. The combat system rewards stylish play through devastating abilities learned from enemies, especially when fighting hordes of Gandrake's robotic soldiers. Once you're fighting an enemy, you can lock onto it with R1, which raises a gauge. When the enemy hits you, you are prompted to hit square, and this allows you to mimic the enemy's ability and then learn it. I don't really know what to compare this to. I guess maybe a blue mage from Final Fantasy with some extra steps along the way. Leveling is extremely gradual. In a few hours of play, I only reached level 4. I sort of expected it to be a little faster, honestly, but hey, it's whatever. It's fine. Once you do level up, you can allow the game to allocate your points, which is pretty handy. I kept choosing offense because you know what? A good offense is a good defense. Throughout the adventure, Musashi rescues villagers trapped in some little orb prison things. Each freed NPC returns to the hub world, opening new shop services, forging weapon upgrades, or expanding your ability repertoire. Like Soul Blazer on the Super Nintendo, the satisfaction comes from watching the base on the back of the giant well slowly return to life as you push deeper into the world's varied dungeons like ancient ruins, floating islands, and steampunk factories. Visually, Samurai Legend is striking, which I'm sure you figured out at this point. I happen to think it's absolutely stunning. It's a bold, smooth, cel-shaded anime aesthetic with character designs by Tetsuya Nomura, and they are loud, exaggerated, and very mid-2000s square. They got them giant belts, those big goggles, and gravity-defying hair, and hey, I'm here for it. Oh, they got those big hands and feet too, and you know what they say about big hands and feet. The animation is fluid and flashy, especially during spinning sword combos. Some reviewers at the time felt the art style clashed with the muddy textures and sparse environments. But I really love the presentation as it's one of the best features in the game and it gives it tons of personality. The soundtrack is aggressive rock riffs with mystical melodies and techno-industrial beats, which you've been hearing in this section, of course. These definitely reinforce the game's mashup of ancient swordplay and modern sci-fi. Surprisingly, the English voice acting is campy but sincere. It's a little more anime dubbed than Hollywood, but it fits the tone well. Now, I'll probably get a little hate for this, but I really only didn't like Musashi's voice. It was a little jarring at times. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that. So weird. Maybe the change in the way Musashi looks, I expected a change in voice as well. I don't know, maybe. Here's some downsides. Good grief. The exposition slap at times is unreal. When I got back to the big whale thing in the beginning, the story webbed in about 10 different directions at the same time, talking about princesses and an evil corporation and summoners and not being able to get home until the magic well gets energy that I can restore by gathering swords. It was laughably aggressive in shoving that down my throat in relentless text boxes. I hate that delivery. The combat is fun and engaging, if a little button mashy, but it all fell apart during boss fights. Boss designs are epic and awesome looking, but in execution, they're a mess. Now, to be fair, if the mechanics of the game worked during a boss fight, maybe they wouldn't be difficult. Gone is the ability to lock onto an enemy as that abruptly drops constantly in boss fights. It has little to do with the distance, it has little to do with transformation of the bosses, it's just gone. With the inconsistent or lack of lock-on, Musashi loses the ability to dodge. You think about that. This is particularly important for a boss fight like this, but it's consistent with each boss fight, not just the first. It's incredibly frustrating. So the game establishes what combat should look like during smaller encounters and then just tosses that to the wind in a boss fight. And to be fair, I've never created a game myself, but I can't help but feel this is poor design. I am confident in telling you that boss fights are about zero fun. Big goose egg. I'm actually getting a little sweaty thinking about it. I'm frustrated. It sucked, especially compared to the good stuff. The camera is absolutely the worst I've seen in a PlayStation 2 game so far. You move the camera with your right thumb, but I can't seem to find where you can change the inversion of the controls. Maybe you can't. That's a little odd. This, with a lack of lock-on during boss fights, is a nightmare to keep up with. Still, even with its issues, I can't help but, you know what, enjoy the game. I think I'm just a glutton for punishment. It reminds me a lot of an unpolished Mega Man Legends setup. Cool ideas, great ideas, just execution at times that doesn't match the polish of the graphics. It's kind of like veneers. Yeah, like veneers. Looking back, it may not have captured the magic of Brave Fencer Musashi, but as a standalone action RPG, it's a fascinating relic, showcasing some interesting experimentation. Flawed? Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. But bad? I don't think so. Except the camera bosses. You ain't got no eyeballs. Oh no. There we go. Let's retry, see if it used all my food. I actually forgot that this next game even existed. Now, when you see the name of it, you're going to know what I was expecting, but what I got was not what I was expecting, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm talking about Shining Force Neo. Shining Force Neo released in 2005 on the PlayStation 2, and it was not Shining Force. I guess that's where the Neo part comes in, right? No longer was the game a tactical RPG focused on slower, strategic, grid-based battles that fans and, everyone had come to expect of the franchise since the Genesis entries. Instead, this game jumped headfirst into Diablo-style action RPG territory with real-time combat, tons of loot, and skill builds and leveling over tactical positioning. For longtime followers, it felt like heresy. Heresy! For me, it felt like heresy! For newcomers, it was something else entirely. A fast, flashy, and surprisingly deep action RPG hiding beneath the shiny name. Now, did this coat of paint change too much? Well, maybe, but it's a solid game. It'd probably be better served to be called something besides Shining Force, and thinking about it from that angle makes it feel a little less like heresy. In playing this game, I didn't feel the series was being reflected heavily in this new setup. The combat is completely different, but there are still some pretty portraits and characters. I mean, there's a centaur, and that has to count for something, right? The story of Shining Force Neo follows Max, a young swordsman whose peaceful training life is shattered when creatures called Legions of Darkness invade the land. What begins as a straightforward coming-of-age tale becomes an epic story, pitting Max against the forces of evil. It's a tale of fallen heroes and the secrets behind ancient shining technology. It's standard fantasy anime fare, but it has heart, plenty of voice dialogue, and the sort of melodrama that simultaneously had me thinking, yo, get a look at this guy, and then being completely intrigued in the next moment. Sort of like when my wife was watching a show and then I find myself becoming interested in her show even though I pretend I wasn't. That's not a terrible far cry from the Genesis games, at least as far as the story goes. The biggest crime Neo commits against the original is the gameplay. And I was a little bitter at first as it was so different from what I'd come to expect, but it grew on me rather quickly. Instead of turn-based battles, players charge through large maps, swarming with enemies in real time, hacking, slashing, casting spells, and dodging attacks. It's Diablo, pretty much straight up. It's fast and relentless, often throwing tons of enemies on screen as Max and his AI party members cut them down. Monsters and their spawners become loot pinatas that burst into experience and money and items. Each area is rather large with lots of places to explore. You can find yourself off the beaten path just looking for more monster spawners and treasures laying around. It's addictive. Like, you know what? Good job. Kill, collect, upgrade, buy, and sell. Keep attacking and keep pressing forward into increasingly chaotic set pieces. It's Diablo. Progression is as addictive as combat. You get stronger with weapons and gear, of course, but the force frame is the bread and butter, it seems. It's a set of abilities that you can put points into, like defense for armor or attack power for melee. You can also find defensives and such under these bars as well. The bars have new skills and new bars added to them based on whatever you find in the field. You, as an example, might find a force that increases the amount of defense you have on your armor or how much damage you deal with swords or fire magic. Now, this doesn't necessarily keep you from experimenting with armor, but it does eventually sort of encourage you to niche down into a particular playstyle. Want to turn Max into a lightning-fast sword master, a fireball-throwing battle mage, or a tank with massive axes? The force frame skill system lets you shape him as you like, but it rewards focus and intentional choices. While you only control Max directly, he's accompanied by a rotating party of AI allies, each representing classic Shining archetypes, which is another cool throwback to the original series of games. Centaurs, dude! Unfortunately, the upgrades that you get for your force stats don't actually affect your party members. They're on their own path, upgrading naturally. And while that might seem to suck that your party members aren't upgrading along with you and your stats, you know what? That's one less person to worry about. That's the way I like to think about it. Visually, Neo is pretty lovely. It's bright, colorful, and charming in that early 2000s PS2 way. Again, the character models are actually sort of small on screen, as you don't get any sort of close-ups to them. Instead, you get dialogue boxes and profile portraits. You can see the models in the menu, but you're more often going to be looking at this game from the perspective and size of Diablo-esque experiences. The models, not to play them out too much, do look nice though. Character designs by anime legend Tony Taka gave the cast an eye-catching style, while enemy swarms packed the screen without typically tanking performance, and you know what, that's impressive. There were times I was checking to see if frames were dropping in emulation, as I did emulate this, but apparently it wasn't, and it was just some in-game stutter, but it wasn't too bad. It didn't really hinder the experience too much. Towns serve as intermissions between dungeons. places to upgrade gear, chat with allies, and soak in the lore of the game. The soundtrack, meanwhile, is heroic melodies with darker rock-tinged dungeon themes. It's catchy and enjoyable, but I didn't download any of these to listen to in the car. It's a solid game. It's completely enjoyable. It's addictive hack and slash fun that I thought, shucks, you know what? I could see myself playing this game for 15 to 20 more hours to knock it out. That's where I'd be wrong. This game is apparently closer to 80 hours to beat. 80! How Long to Beat clocks this game at 77 hours. What the flip? You know what? For around the same amount of time, you could beat Diablo 1, Diablo 2, Diablo 3, and probably Diablo 4's campaign. Maybe I won't be finishing this game one day. Aside from being long, it's also just a major departure from the original, and that's something Shining fans will likely lament. The story is a little predictable even in the early hours, but again, it's tropey and fun. The real enjoyment, though, comes in that customization of your character and mowing down swarms of enemies on the battlefield. It's just an impressive and fulfilling gameplay loop that many will surely enjoy. As far as I'm concerned, Shining Force Neo succeeds as a surprisingly meaty, satisfying hack and slash RPG. It's brimming with customization, spectacle, and that unmistakable Sega heart. This next game actually has a re-release already, but I wanted to play the authentic PlayStation 2 experience to share that with you. But while I was playing it, I did realize that I really need to pick up the remake because this game is so enjoyable. Maybe I can catch it on sale and get a few moments to play it. I didn't think I would even like this sort of game. Like, I kind of been putting it off because I didn't think I would enjoy it. But I ended up loving it. The game I'm talking about is Devil Summoner, Radu Kuzunoa versus the Soulless Army. Ah, Atlas. Love them. At one point in my life, I would buy anything that had Atlas, Square, or Working Designs logo on it. I actually owned Part 1 and Part 2 of this series for PlayStation 2 years ago, and I have, since sold them. That's a shame. Radu Kuzunoa and the Soulless Army is strange, slick, and distinctive. By my understanding, it's one of the more unique RPGs on the PlayStation 2. While it has the Shin Megami Tensei name and pedigree, it stands apart from the mainline series and even the Persona games of its era, and I can appreciate that. Instead of high school drama or apocalyptic moral choices, Rado gives us a Japanese period piece full of conspiracies, military technology, demon folklore, and hard-boiled detective work. And I have absolutely adored my time with it thus far. You play as Radu Kuzunoa the 14th, a young man tasked with protecting early Taisho-era Tokyo from supernatural threats. By day, he works for a detective, but by profession, he's a devil summoner. Part exorcist, part spy, accompanied by a talking black cat named Gauto, whose commentary steals nearly every scene. I love this cat. The plot kicks off when a frantic young woman begs Rudo's Narumi Detective Agency to kill her, and then she's kidnapped, vanishing before your eyes as soldiers from a rogue Imperial faction abduct her. What follows is a mystery involving government experiments, mechanized demons, and a soulless army designed to replace humanity itself. And that's a heck of a premise, one that I can certainly get behind. I appreciate too that the game is experienced in episodic stories, each one taking a couple of hours or so. I think this makes for digestible chunks of gameplay and story that you could stretch over a few days to really enjoy the whole game without fatigue. Again, I've loved the aesthetics associated with this series of games, but I'm not always on board with the premises. I'm not looking to throw shade at anyone or anything, but I don't really enjoy the high school game aspects in a lot of these series. Folks, I'm a high school teacher, and so maybe one day I can get behind these, maybe when I retire. But for right now, I don't want to spend all day at school and then come home and play a game about school. Like, I hope that's understandable. I imagine it's the same sort of thing, like, once a chef works all day, the chef probably doesn't want to come home and play Cooking Mama. You get it, right? Rather than turn-based combat, Rudo uses a real-time action battle system, which absolutely took me by surprise. I thought this was going to be turn-based, just like other Persona games and the like, but hey, it's not. And I like it quite a bit. Battles take place in small arenas where Rudo slashes with his katana, shoots with his revolver, and, most importantly, summons demons he's recruited to fight alongside him. Demons can be commanded to attack, cast spells, buff, debuff, or exploit weaknesses, and every fight becomes a balancing act of positioning, timing, and demon management. It's not as fast as a typical action game, nor as strategic as a true Shin Megami Tensei title, but it's an intriguing middle ground, and I enjoy it. You will mostly be slashing with that katana and using the power moves that combine you with your demon when you have done enough critical strikes or slashing or whatever, whenever you fill up the bar. The gun is useful for exploiting weaknesses, but it's usually just used to trigger a critical opportunity with weaknesses. If you shoot a fire demon with ice bullets, for example, it'll weaken it and your attacks become criticals. And you know what? That's actually kind of addictive. You can set your demon buddy to do certain things, not unlike the AI in most action RPGs. I usually just had mine spam spells until they were out of mana. It's not efficient, I realize, but this chick kept me healed and my other dudes lit people up. If it works, it works. Demon recruitment and fusion remain core mechanics. Rudeau must capture enemies to collect them. It works a little like Pokemon, like you're supposed to weaken them to a certain point. And then if you've weakened them enough, you can stand beside them and spam the circle button, and then you can capture them, hopefully. These become your allies and can also be fused to create new, stronger allies, which I hear is like Persona's Velvet Room, though I'm a little unfamiliar with that, honestly. Each demon also has a field ability, unlocking doors, reading minds, forcing confessions, finding clues, that sort of stuff. This makes them integral to both combat and detective work, and it's a really neat piece of gameplay. This link between RPG mechanics and story investigation gives the game a uniquely cohesive feel. It feels, honestly, just well thought out. Visually, the game mixes 3D character models with beautifully hand-painted pre-rendered backgrounds that evoke early 1900s Tokyo in sepia detail. I think the enemy and character designs are all incredible. It's a beautiful aesthetic, even if not bright like I normally enjoy. The soundtrack, as you might imagine if you're familiar with this series of games, is phenomenal. It's got jazzy horns, traditional Japanese instruments, and noir piano riffs that give the game a style that feels so beautifully fresh compared to all those grandiose horns and drums from medieval RPGs. Apparently, critically, THOSE Army was praised for its atmosphere and originality, and deservedly so. It seems that some found its action combat repetitive and its story pacing a little uneven, but I've really enjoyed it. It clearly did something right as it received that remake years later. As a matter of fact, playing this PlayStation 2 version has, put me on the hunt, watching for a good sale on the remake, which I am excited to one day own and play. Maybe the reason I enjoy Devil Summoner Radu Kuzunoa vs. the THOSE Army is because it's an RPG for players who love genre-bending experiments, and I definitely do. It might not offer the emotional punch of Persona 3 or the philosophical weight of Nocturne, but it gives you something else entirely, a supernatural detective story where jazz, folklore, and guns collide in one of the most stylish adventures I've ever seen, and on the PlayStation 2 no less. I can't help but highly recommend it. You did it! You made it this far into the video. Great job! Now you might be finishing up some other kind of work on the side. That's not a big deal. Maybe you're driving, doing homework, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's just over on your other monitor. I don't want to interrupt that too much. However, I'm happy to be on this journey, whatever you're doing, with you. Thank you. If you like this video, I have a lot of other videos very similar to this on my channel, and I'm always producing more. Sorry, Cody. If you'd like to see more, check out the playlist at the end of this video or consider subscribing for future videos. Thank you, friends, for your support. Let's carry on. Final Fantasy, Dirge of Cerberus. This might be the strangest experiment I've ever seen with Final Fantasy. And that's okay. Instead of a turn-based RPG or even a traditional action RPG, we have a dark and moody third-person shooter starring Vincent Valentine, the mysterious, handsome, vampire-like optional character from the original game, Final Fantasy VII. This game is gritty, beautiful, and completely fascinating. Let's start with this. I had been interested in Dirge of Cerberus basically since it came out. I still have my used GameStop copy for the PlayStation 2, but I never got around to playing it. My friends all said they wanted to play it, but I don't think any of them ever jumped into it and tried it out when we were younger. Since then, I've heard a lot of negativity regarding this game and how the controls are bad and it just wasn't fun. I don't know if you'd heard the same negativity, my friends, but I'm here to tell you that I really enjoyed it, and I think that those criticisms are basically unfounded. So what does this game do? Set 3 years after the events of Advent Children, you play as Vincent as he uncovers a conspiracy involving Deep Ground, a secret division of soldier hidden beneath Midgar. This was such a secret that, aside from Heidegger, Scarlet, and Hojo, it would have been buried with the late president of Shinra. Deep Ground is led by twisted super soldiers called Svets, whatever. And seemingly all of them are named after a color, and that color represents them. Azul the cerulean, Rosso the crimson, Vice the white, I guess. Deep Ground plans to use Vincent's protomateria to awaken Omega, a world-ending final weapon. The story goes hard on lore, connecting Vincent's tragic past with Lucretia, and Hojo to a new, almost Devil May Cry-esque world of bioterror and gothic sci-fi. I think that's how you pronounce that, Lucretia. I can't remember. And that's probably the best comparison I can make here. This is a very, very Devil May Cry feeling sort of game, which may have drawn some ire from folks, but again, I'm here for it. Gameplay is Dirge's most radical change from the Final Fantasy formula. Gone are menu-driven combat and gone are ATB gauges. Instead, in this game, you shoot. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. For the most part, you can like melee, but it's just not as effective as just blasting. Vincent's Cerberus handgun, along with shotguns and rifles you pick up, can be customized with parts and materia, turning the combat into a hybrid of RPG stat progression and arcade shooter. It's really solid experimental stuff. I actually really enjoyed customizing my gun layout and switching back and forth between the guns as the situation called for it. Blasting enemies with magic is super limited, but it's also incredibly powerful and, again, enjoyable. Vincent also has the ability to transform into a monstrous limit break form, temporarily tearing through enemies in melee mode. Again, I keep using this word, but it's stylish, chaotic, and undeniably odd at first, but once you get the hang of it, there's a rhythm to chaining shots, melee, and magic together, and it's super, super satisfying. While Vincent is the lone playable character, the game brings in cameos from the original Final Fantasy VII crew. I don't want to spoil too much, but most show up for a brief but satisfying support moment. Fans who were hoping for a party-based RPG were understandably disappointed, but for those who loved Final Fantasy VII's lore, like I do, finally got a deeper dive into one of the most mysterious characters in the franchise. And I think this game does extremely well in putting us back in the world of Final Fantasy VII and allowing us to see the after effects of Meteor and how the people are handling it. The story, I think, is solid, and it's a shame that I missed out on it for so long. With that said, the cutscenes are super enjoyable, like watching part of a movie. It's almost Metal Gear Solid-esque. Maybe not as long as those cutscenes, but certainly, not a breezy moment either. Most of the exposition comes from these, but it's interesting stuff if you're a fan of Final Fantasy VII. Visually, Dirge of Cerberus is pure gothic loveliness. Towering ruined cathedrals, neon-highlighted Midgar alleyways, iron laboratories, and bloody corridors stuffed with deep-ground troops. The soundtrack switches between operatic, industrial, and tragic, perfectly fitting Vincent's moody anti-hero persona, and I absolutely adored it. It was just seemingly perfect in every moment in the game. And you know what? Voice acting is solid for the most part, with Steve Blum as the gravelly Vincent. Of course, the voice acting on the PlayStation 2 era can be a little campy, but most of the camp comes from the villain brigade, and you know what? That's forgivable. Critically, the game divided its audience. Was it for Final Fantasy fans? Well, the story fits, but the gunplay is a lot more action-oriented. It's honestly action-heavy enough that I wondered for a moment if I should put it on this list after I started playing it. Was it for shooter fans? Well, the gunplay wasn't smooth enough for action folks, I'd imagine. It's probably safe to say that it's too slow for action shooter fans and too fast for turn-based RPG fans. Alongside this criticism, the RPG elements are a bit light if you're an RPG purist. As a dude who loves RPGs and has a pretty loose definition for the genre, this game is different, hey, but it's solid. If you're willing to meet the game halfway, Dirge of Cerberus will give you a surprisingly emotional character study wrapped in an odd shooter RPG hybrid that's pretty hard to put down. I find myself saying this more often than not, as I get older and I have less time for games, but I really appreciate that the game puts everything kind of in episodic little stories, like little episodes there, little chapters. It's broken into smaller pieces that are easy to digest, and it's really not a terribly long game. You can finish the story or level chunk in about 45 minutes to an hour at a time, and those are some solid and suitable gameplay sessions for a busy person. The game itself isn't terribly long either, coming in at about 10 to 12 hours for a playthrough and about 30 hours or so for 100% completion. This game is a reminder of an era when Square Enix was experimenting wildly with a compilation of Final Fantasy VII, attempting to stick it in whatever media in whatever form. And you know what? I kind of miss it. I can't remember if I appreciated it at this time, but looking back, I'm happy they were trying out some different ideas. This game isn't the most polished game in the series, but it's arguably the boldest. It was certainly daring to be different. If you can appreciate its mechanics, Dirge of Cerberus still offers something unique. A chance to walk the shadows with Vincent, gun in hand, and face the monsters of Shinra and the ghost of his past.
Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you.